The city rose like a promise made of glass and steel. Tall towers shone under the sun, their windows reflecting wealth and speed. Yet beneath those towers, the earth remembered. The soil held the footsteps of ancestors, the prayers poured into it long before concrete covered its face. Even as engines roared and phones rang, the ground stayed quiet, heavy with stories that refused to die. Not far from the shining buildings, dusty streets wound through old neighborhoods. Ancestral compounds stood with cracked walls and rusted gates, breathing slowly like tired elders. Children played barefoot near open drains, their laughter cutting through the noise of traffic. Goats wandered freely, unbothered by ambition. Here, life moved at its own pace, untouched by hurry, carrying the smell of firewood and cooked maize. From shaded doorways, elders sat on wooden stools, watching the city rush past them. Their eyes followed expensive cars without envy. They had seen many seasons, many rises and falls. One old man clicked his tongue softly and said, "A river that forgets its source will one day dry." No one answered him, but his words stayed in the air. Street vendors lined the roads, calling out softly, selling fruit, bread, and roasted corn. Women balanced trays on their heads like crowns, their backs straight with quiet pride. Proverbs floated between them, spoken in low voices. Judgment did not shout here. It waited. Society watched, remembered, and stored every truth for its time. Among these people walked a woman with tired eyes and steady steps. She owned little, but her dignity showed in the way she carried herself. Poverty had pressed her many times, but it had not bent her spine. Neighbors knew her as someone who greeted elders properly and never begged, even when hunger visited her home. She once believed marriage was sacred, a bond sealed not only by vows but by ancestors. Love, to her, was destiny. She had trusted it fully. For that love, she sold her dreams quietly. School books were closed. Jewelry was gone. Comfort became a stranger. When others laughed at her sacrifices, she only said, "A house is built one stone at a time." Now she walked with a secret resting inside her. Her hand often moved to her belly, gently, as if guarding a fragile promise. The child grew silently, like a prayer whispered in the dark. Hope and fear shared the same space in her heart. Each step she took carried both pain and faith, as the ancestors watched and waited. Hunger had once been his closest friend. In those days, his stomach spoke louder than his dreams, and the world passed him by without a glance. Now his name moved faster than his shadow. It appeared on billboards, newspapers, and screens. When people spoke it, their voices changed. Some lowered their heads in respect. Some smiled with envy. Others whispered with fear. He was the man everyone pointed to and said, "That one has made it." But ambition had sharpened his heart the same way hunger once had. He climbed without turning back. Each step upward demanded something, and he paid with pieces of himself. Compassion was the first to fall. When an old friend greeted him in the street, he nodded without stopping. When his mother spoke of the old ways, he said, "Times have changed." In his world, speed mattered more than memory. Wealth wrapped around him like a thick wall. Inside were soft carpets, cold air, and voices that praised him day and night. Outside were his people, his culture, and the values that raised him. Family gatherings became rare. Traditional greetings felt heavy on his tongue. He sent money instead of presents and believed that was enough. "I have done my part," he often told himself. One truth, however, he buried deeper than all others. A marriage from his past lay hidden like an unwanted bone in the throat. He never spoke of it. Silence became his shield. Accountability felt like weakness, and he refused to wear it. Long before the headlines, there was love born from empty plates and shared laughter. They had met when nothing was certain except struggle. They dreamed together under leaking roofs, promising that hardship was only a season. "One day, this will change," he used to say. She believed him with her whole heart. When sacrifice was needed, she gave it quietly. Jewelry left her hands. Meals became smaller. Faith carried the weight of tomorrow. "We are building something," she would whisper when her stomach growled. He climbed, stepping on the stones she laid. But voices crept in. Relatives compared him to others. "Look at so-and-so's wife," they said. "She brings wealth, not hunger. Laughter followed. Comparison poisoned what love had built. He listened more to the crowd than to the woman beside him. When success finally arrived, gratitude slipped out the back door. Pride sat where partnership once lived. He stood taller, spoke louder, and looked past her instead of at her. And though she still stood by him, something sacred had already begun to break, unseen but unstoppable, like a crack in dry earth before the storm. Success arrived like a loud drumbeat, and with it came his excuse to walk away. One evening, dressed in new clothes that still smelled of wealth, he stood at the doorway and did not sit. His eyes avoided hers. "I have grown," he said coldly. "This life no longer fits me." She searched his face, confused. "We grew together," she replied softly. He shook his head. "People like me cannot be tied to the past." That was the day achievement gave him permission to leave, and he took it without looking back. Soon after, words became weapons. He spoke first, louder than truth. He told people she was lazy, ungrateful, a burden that slowed him down. Each lie wore the mask of wisdom. "I carried her for years," he told his friends. "She refused to change." The truth was bent until it broke. His reputation was protected, polished like gold, while hers was dragged through dust. She left the house with nothing but her clothes and shame that was not hers. No one asked her side. No elder called her name to hear her pain. Justice slept while she walked away alone. As she passed familiar faces, doors closed quietly. Her voice had no place to rest. Whispers followed her like shadows. "A woman who cannot keep a man must be cursed," some said. Others nodded in agreement. Power chose its side, and truth was left standing in the rain. Life after divorce did not wait for her tears to dry. In a society quick to forgive men, her broken marriage became her identity. Wherever she went, eyes measured her. "That is the woman he left," people murmured. She learned to lower her gaze, not from guilt, but from exhaustion. Her mornings began before the sun touched the sky. She washed her face in cold water and tied her worn scarf tightly. By the time roosters crowed, she was already walking. Survival followed her until midnight. Her body ached, but rest felt like a luxury meant for others. Sweat became her daily companion. At work, voices cut deep. "Hurry," they shouted. "You are slow." Insults fell like stones, but she swallowed them. Hunger was louder than pride. Each insult fed her strength in silence. With time, her belly began to grow. At first, fear lived there. Then something else joined it, power. She would rest her hand there and whisper, "We will survive." The weight was heavy, but it straightened her back. Pain taught her courage. Some days, people offered charity. "Take this," they said, pity heavy in their hands. She refused with a quiet smile. Charity felt like chains. Dignity, though painful, felt free. She chose struggle over being owned by kindness that looked down on her. At night, as she lay on a thin mat, she remembered an old saying her grandmother once told her, "The tree that bends in the storm is the one that lives to see another season." She closed her eyes, breathing slowly. Outside, the world judged her. Inside, she gathered strength. And somewhere beyond sight, the ancestors watched, patient and unblinking, as fate prepared its return. The restaurant lived two lives at the same time. By day, it shone with polished floors and soft music. By night, it swallowed tired bodies and quiet suffering. It was a place where the invisible fed the powerful. Plates moved from trembling hands to golden tables, carrying food, respect, and silence. Those who served were rarely seen. Those who ate believed the world was built to please them. The restaurant stood like a mirror, showing who mattered and who was meant to disappear. She moved between tables with careful steps, balancing heavy trays as if they were part of her body. People spoke over her head, their laughter loud and careless. "Bring more water," one man said without looking at her. "And hurry," another added, eyes fixed on his phone. No one asked her name. No one wondered where she came from. Wealth consumed without greeting, without thanks, without memory. She learned to smile with her mouth while her eyes stayed quiet. Inside her, life was growing. Each step made her back ache, but she did not slow down. One hand often rested on her belly, a small circle of protection. Hope lived there, soft but stubborn. Outside her body, pain lived freely. Old memories walked beside her, of love, betrayal, and nights spent crying into thin pillows. Still, she stood straight. The child inside her became her reason to breathe deeper. Sometimes, as she passed the corner table near the window, she noticed an old man sitting alone, sipping tea slowly. His eyes followed her, not with hunger, but with knowing. Once, when she brought his plate, he said gently, "Daughter, the ground remembers every footstep." She nodded, unsure why her chest tightened. The ancestors, she felt, were watching through eyes like his. Through the sudden flicker of lights. Through the spoon that fell without reason. Fate was patient. Truth was gathering strength. Far away from the smell of food and sweat, he lived in a mansion that echoed with applause. Every visit brought praise. Every meeting ended with smiles and handshakes. Yet when the doors closed, silence sat beside him. The rooms were large, but peace did not live there. At night, he walked from room to room, unable to rest. Wealth surrounded him, but sleep avoided him. Enemies grew with his success. Business partners smiled during the day and sharpened knives at night. He trusted no one fully. Fear became his shadow. He had everything people prayed for, yet his soul felt hollow. Sometimes, alone, he whispered, "Why does it still feel empty?" No answer came. His family celebrated his money loudly. "You have lifted our name," they said. "You are a great man." No one asked how he lifted it or who fell beneath him. Character was forgotten. Only numbers mattered. When his mother once spoke of his past, he cut her short. "Those days are gone," he said. "Do not bring them back." He believed money could bury history, that success could erase old wounds. He convinced himself that silence was proof of innocence. What is not spoken no longer exists, he told his reflection. But deep inside, something stirred. A voice he had ignored for too long knocked softly. That same night, in the restaurant, she finished her shift slowly, hands sore, feet swollen. As she stepped outside, the moon rose, full and watching. She placed her hand on her belly again and whispered, "We will be strong." Somewhere between the mansion and the restaurant, between excess and endurance, fate tightened its grip. The circle was closing, and the ancestors were ready. The elders gathered beneath the wide mango tree, their walking sticks resting on the earth like symbols of authority. They spoke of success with shining eyes. "He has lifted his people," one elder said proudly. "His wealth speaks for him," another agreed. Few spoke of justice. Fewer still asked who paid the price for that rise. Tradition bent quietly, shaped to praise power instead of truth. The old rules that once protected the weak now bowed to money. Those who questioned it were silenced with proverbs that had lost their meaning. Soon, new plans were whispered into his ears. A new bride was suggested, one from a powerful family, clean of history and rich in connections. "This marriage will complete your image," an uncle told him. "People forget faster when they see celebration." He nodded, not because his heart agreed, but because his pride did. Marriage, once a bond of duty, became a tool. Status mattered more than responsibility. Love was no longer asked to enter the room. Among his peers, a man was measured by how loudly his name echoed, not by how well he protected those who trusted him. Strength was shown in command, not care. When someone mentioned his past, he laughed it off. "A real man moves forward," he said. "Only the weak look back." Yet each word felt heavy. The louder he spoke, the more he tried to drown a voice inside him that refused to sleep. He ran from memory the way one runs from fire, fast, careless, and afraid. He changed routes, avoided old places, ignored familiar names. At night, when silence crept close, he poured himself another drink and stared at the ceiling. "It is over," he told himself again and again. But memories are stubborn. They knock softly, then harder, until they are heard. That same evening, he stepped out of his car and into a restaurant chosen for a business meeting. The door opened, and two worlds met. Inside was a room built on silent struggle. The air smelled of cooked food and tired bodies. Laughter floated from rich tables, resting on unseen labor. His expensive suit brushed past worn floors. Shiny shoes crossed paths with cracked tiles. Around him moved tired hands carrying heavy trays. He barely noticed at first. To him, such places existed only to serve. Then she looked up. For a moment, her breath caught. Her eyes recognized him instantly. Years collapsed into a single heartbeat. Pain rose like a wave, but discipline held it back. She lowered her head and stepped aside, the way survival had taught her. "Table 7, someone called. She answered softly, "Yes," and moved on, as if her world had not just shaken. He did not see her face at once. But something stirred. A weight pressed against his chest. When he finally looked again, his gaze fell on her belly. It was round, undeniable. Truth stood before him without asking permission. She tried to pass quickly, but the child within her shifted. Her hand moved there by instinct. The secret she had carried quietly now refused to hide. The room seemed smaller. The noise faded. What was buried began to rise. She kept walking, each step steady, her face calm. Inside, her heart raced. Outside, she remained strong. And across the room, he stood frozen, caught between who he had become and what he had left behind. The ancestors, unseen but present, leaned closer. Fate had opened the door, and neither of them could close it again. His eyes lifted slowly, as if pulled by a force stronger than pride. In that instant, his soul stumbled. He saw her fully now, not as a shadow passing by, not as a worker among many, but as the woman he once knew, standing before him with a weight he could not ignore. Fate struck like a sudden drumbeat in the chest. His breath caught. His hand tightened around the edge of the table. The world seemed to stop moving. Plates hovered in the air. Voices faded into nothing. Even the music fell silent, as if afraid to interrupt. Time froze while the room held its breath. It felt as though unseen elders had gathered, forming a circle around him. Their judgment came without words. Silence pressed down heavier than any shout. The ancestors were listening now. His eyes dropped to her belly, round and alive. The cost of his success stood written there, clear as a scar. All the money, all the praise, all the doors he had opened, none of them could erase what he saw. Wealth had given him height, but it had also given him blindness. Now consequence stood before him, breathing, waiting. He whispered without sound, "No, this cannot be." But truth does not retreat when called by fear. Inside him, guilt rose first, sharp and burning. Fear followed close behind, cold and shaking. Then shame arrived, heavy and slow, settling deep in his bones. The three collided without mercy, tearing through the walls he had built so carefully. This was not a business problem. This was not a rumor to silence. This was reckoning. His body reacted before his mind could speak. His knees weakened. A tremor ran through his hands. He felt small, exposed, like a boy caught stealing under his father's gaze. The power he carried outside meant nothing inside this moment. His heart beat wildly, each thud reminding him that he was still human. No words came. His mouth opened, then closed again. The sudden silence around him grew louder than any accusation. People noticed now. Chairs creaked. Someone cleared their throat. Still, he could not speak. Fear froze his tongue. He had argued with men in boardrooms, faced enemies with calm eyes, but this silence defeated him. The room changed shape in his mind. The walls fell away, replaced by a wide circle of elders seated on wooden stools. Their faces were calm, their eyes deep with knowing. One elder leaned forward and said, though his lips did not move, "You cannot outrun what you planted." Another tapped his staff on the ground. The sound echoed like a verdict. Truth and lies were being weighed, and excuses were too light. Then he saw it, the future standing before him. Not just a woman, not just a child, but his bloodline. His legacy. His name continued in a body he had tried to forget. The realization struck him hard, stealing his breath. My child! The thought came uninvited, terrifying in its clarity. This was not rumor. This was life. He reached instinctively for his wallet, then stopped. The gesture felt foolish. What price could buy forgiveness here? What amount could purchase escape? Money, once his shield, lay useless. It could not turn back time. It could not silence ancestors. It could not heal what was broken. Across the room, She stood still. Her face was calm, her eyes steady. She did not accuse him. She did not beg. Her strength unsettled him more than anger ever could. One hand rested on her belly, firm and protective. In that quiet gesture lived judgment and grace together. He finally found his voice, but it came out weak. "I." The word fell and died between them. She met his eyes then, just once. No hatred lived there. Only truth. In that moment, he understood an old saying his grandmother used to repeat, "When the drum of truth sounds, even the deaf will hear." The drum had begun to beat, and there would be no silence strong enough to stop it now. A murmur began softly, almost unnoticed, like wind through the tall grasses of the savannah. Then it grew. Whispers spread faster than fire in dry grass, racing from table to table, curling around voices and spilling into ears eager for scandal. "Is that really her?" one woman asked, lips trembling with curiosity. "It cannot be," a man whispered, eyes darting. Every gaze sharpened, every heartbeat quickened. The invisible threads of society pulled taut, weaving judgment and wonder into the same fabric. Eyes turned. Faces changed. Friends who had shared idle laughter now tilted heads with suspicion. Waiters paused mid-step. Business partners leaned closer, sensing a story unfolding before them. It was not just curiosity, it was recognition of truth. The room seemed smaller now, crowded with unspoken questions. Every glance pressed against him like a weight he could not lift. The crowd sensed a hidden story, one that no wealth could disguise. She moved through it all with a quiet grace. She did not plead, she did not beg. In the house of her pain, dignity became her shield. Her back remained straight, her eyes lowered, her voice soft yet firm when necessary. "Table 9, sir," she said, and the simple words carried authority. People expected tears, expected outrage. Instead, they found calm. Strength resided there, and it unsettled everyone. Silence rose as the strongest accusation. No one could ignore her presence, yet no one could touch it. Every moment she held herself, every careful gesture, spoke louder than shouts. The room held its breath, waiting for the next move, waiting for the unspoken truth to settle like dust on the floor. Inside him, memories returned like ancestral drums in his chest. He felt the rhythm of old sacrifices, the echo of her faith, the hunger she had endured for him. He saw nights when she sold what little she had to feed his dreams. The past hammered him, unstoppable and relentless. He understood at last that betrayal had wounded more than a woman. It had broken culture, tradition, and lineage, leaving jagged edges where trust once lived. Each memory cut deeper than any insult or loss. And the child within her became a living question of responsibility, a beating reminder of what he had abandoned. That life demanded recognition, demanded accountability, demanded the courage he had long forgotten. Pride and conscience locked in mortal struggle. One whispered that he could still protect his image, hide from shame. The other reminded him that a man is measured not by gold, but by the weight of his deeds. He trembled, caught between what he wanted and what he could no longer deny, the soul divided and trembling under the eyes of ancestors long gone but watching still. He stood frozen, heart pounding like the drums of the ancestors. Two paths opened before him, each demanding a choice heavier than gold. Deny everything, preserving the polished image built on a broken past, or speak the truth, facing shame and exposing the years of silence. Every breath felt like a trial, every blink a summons to courage he had long avoided. To hide, or to stand, he whispered to the empty air, yet the words carried through the room like a challenge. Cowardice had been his companion for years, dressed in fine suits and bowed heads. But now, in the presence of truth, it felt hollow. He drew a deep breath and stepped forward. "I have failed," he said, voice shaking yet clear, carrying over the murmurs of the gathered crowd. "I failed as a husband, as a father, and as a son of this soil. I abandoned those who trusted me. I cannot undo the past, but I will face it." Laughter rose first, sharp and cruel. Eyes widened. Some whispered judgment, some disbelief. His reputation, built on wealth and fear, crumbled with every word. Yet he held firm. Pain etched into each syllable reminded all present that redemption asks for a price before peace can be found. The elders leaned in, nodding slowly. Even the ancestors seemed to whisper from unseen corners, A man is measured not by what he owns, but by how he corrects the wrongs he has left behind. I will restore what I have broken, he continued, voice steadier now. I will honor her. I will honor the child. I will honor the traditions that I have disrespected. Let my actions prove my repentance, for words alone cannot satisfy the law of the ancestors. The room held its breath. Silence, heavy and reverent, filled the space. It was the first moment in years that his name was no longer feared for wealth, but measured for courage, accountability, and the path he now chose to walk. She lifted her head, shoulders steady, eyes calm yet sharp, and spoke with a quiet authority that silenced murmurs before they could form. I will not bend to anger, she said softly, voice carrying like a river through the room. I have learned that strength is not in shouts, but in standing firm when the world expects you to break. Each word held weight, and those who listened felt the power of dignity far stronger than any raised hand or bitter accusation. Years of silence had not dulled her. If anything, they had sharpened her resolve. She walked among whispers and stares as though they were merely shadows passing along the wall, unworthy of notice. Her past, heavy with pain and betrayal, now served as the foundation of her authority. She chose her battles carefully, guided not by revenge but by the moral compass her ancestors had instilled. I will act, but I will act with justice, not spite, she told herself, letting the thought echo in the hearts of those around her. The elders, once silent in the face of wealth and fear, rose slowly, their robes rustling like leaves in the wind. Their voices, deep and resonant, cut through arrogance and pretense. Justice is not in ruin, but in restoration, one said, eyes sweeping the room. A man's fortune is meaningless if it cannot heal what he has broken. Gold and power bowed quietly under the weight of tradition. Wealth, once a shield for pride, now served the duty of making right what had been wronged. Balance returned not with punishment, but with wisdom. The voices of the past, carried by elders and ancestors alike, reminded all present that the measure of a society is in its respect for truth and morality. She became the living embodiment of right and wrong, the heart of a story where patience, courage, and dignity finally claimed their victory. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the city that once celebrated wealth above all else. Towers of glass reflected gold and ambition, but beneath their shine, truth had quietly waited. Empires can be built with gold and stone, an elder said, voice steady as the wind through the trees, but truth cannot be buried, no matter how deep. The man who once measured himself by riches now understood. His legacy would not be counted in accounts or buildings, but in responsibility, the care he owed to those he had wronged. The woman who had endured betrayal stood with the quiet strength of generations behind her, carrying the weight of tomorrow in her dignity. Even a child, unborn yet full of promise, seemed to hold the balance of right and wrong in tiny growing hands. The ancestors watched from the edges of the world, their faces calm, their judgment satisfied. Harmony returned to the hearts of those who had witnessed pride humbled and truth reclaimed. Gold no longer ruled the day. Humanity, courage, and accountability had won. The story did not end in loud triumph or celebration, but in humility, a quiet lesson whispered across time. What is abandoned by the reckless will always return, and only through honor does a life truly endure.